Hello everybody and welcome to one of the most controversial mods for one of the world's most controversial games. I am here for a change, not to play something, but just to use this game's extremely accessible interactive map feature to ramble a bit about, some shit that's been going on. So you might know that a little organization called Hamas has embedded itself in the government of a little place called Gaza. To what extent the government of Gaza and Hamas are just the same thing, I can't really speak, but it is an all but undisputable fact that there is Hamas in that government. And it's actually a very interesting story how they got there, because they actually ran in opposition to the government of Palestine proper, and they did so with the backing of a very interesting patron. This guy, Benjamin Netanyahu, who in 2017 and also today currently is the leader of Israel. Hoyfor is not telling me whether he's their president or their prime minister, whatever. Basically, this guy is to Israel what Donald Trump was to America, what Hitler was to Germany, what Mao Zedong was to China. Wait, no, hang on. The very best possible comparison. Netanyahu is to Israel what Putin is to Russia. Very simple and easy comparison to be made there, actually. The more you look into their past, the more similarities you will see. In the lead up to the attack that Hamas made, if I understand correctly, Egypt warned Israel that an attack of some kind was coming from Hamas in Gaza. And yet when it happened, catastrophic casualties and very sluggish initial response from the Israeli army. So what the hell is up with that? Like, why is the branch of the Palestinian government that Netanyahu bolstered attacking Israel? Well, the answer to that is relatively simple. Hamas explicitly want to destroy Israel. They are justifiably categorized as a terrorist organization. Very similar to what you've got up in Lebanon with Hezbollah. And at this point, if you weren't already, you're probably scratching your head and going, okay, so if that's their stated goal, then why would Netanyahu fund them? Well, essentially because they opposed the moderate government in the West Bank. Netanyahu does not want the Palestinian state, if you can call it a state, to be controlled by moderates. He does not want a de-escalation of the situation. When you think of Palestine, he wants you to think of Hamas. And basically, what this is just that working too well. In Western countries, and this has come right to the forefront in the midst of this conflict, Western countries have a very strong tendency to conflate Palestinians with Hamas. And that is exactly how Netanyahu wants it. The reason why he backed Hamas against the more moderate government of the Palestinian West Bank is because he wants a walking casus belli to be in charge of Palestine. Very simply put, he doesn't like border gore. He wants to paint this map blue. By the way, this province is part of Syria. Fight me. It is illegally occupied, big beef with Syria. Very rightly they want that occupation to stop. And it's not going away anytime soon because the United States recognizes it. You are inevitably going to stop here. So of course there's going to be a settlement there. And if you look at this map, what you see is that it's right on the crossroads between Egypt, Israel, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. Israel, let's not kid ourselves, is surrounded by enemies. Turkey doesn't like Israel. Iran absolutely hates Israel. There's no love lost between Israel and Iraq. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, Yemen, all these countries, generally speaking, not big fans of Israel. And ever since Israel was created after World War II, a massive priority for the Israeli government has been normalizing relations with its neighbors so that they don't face invasion constantly. And Saudi Arabia and Egypt have in fact been cozying up to Israel and essentially reconciling themselves to the fact that it's not going anywhere anytime soon. With about half an hour of research, I could probably give you a 3-hour essay on all the ways that the British Empire fucked up this entire region after World War II by the way they drew the map. Because, let's face it, they really fucked up the region by the way they drew the map. They were planning to do one good thing by giving the Kurds a country of their own, but that fell through for a lot of reasons. Mostly Turkey. But they also promised the Jews that were living in the British Empire at the time their own country in Palestine. And at the time, that didn't happen. Surprise, surprise, the Brits went back on their word, like always. Believe you me, if there is a way for the British to fuck something up, they will find a way to fuck it up worse. So after World War II, they were like, okay, let's actually do that. And they settled a whole bunch of Holocaust survivors, and also Jews from around the world, in Palestine. And in order to do that, they had to displace the Palestinians who were already living there. Now, I have heard and seen, not just since the attack, but basically my whole life, a whole bunch of Israel apologists who will say things like, well, if you want to talk about an ancestral right to the land, then the Israelis actually have one going back thousands of years. And if that's you watching this, I just want to impart to you the sheer magnitude of your stupidity. Because where do you think the Palestinians come from? In America, we generally assume that they're descendants of the people who were left in Palestine when Rome deported a whole bunch of Jews, but not all the Jews, to different corners of its empire. In other words, the Palestinians are descended, on the one hand, from the Jews that were left there, and on the other hand, if you believe the biblical account of the Exodus and the Judaic conquest of the Canaanites, then the Palestinians are also descended from the people who lived there before that invasion. So if I were to dignify that brain-dead take with a fart, it would still strengthen my position. My metric for who has an ancestral right to land is actually flipped backwards, completely opposite from the line of thinking that produces that take. Because the oldest living Jew never met as a child a Jew who remembered living in Palestine before the Roman deportation. In contrast, there are Palestinians alive today who were deported by the British Empire in order to create the modern Israeli state. In other words, the older the land right claim being made, the less I care about it. Now, with that being said, there are a shit ton of civilians living in Israel, and do those civilians deserve to be displaced? No, they don't deserve it either. They didn't choose to settle here. They were born here. And furthermore, the Israeli government intentionally muddies the waters of who is a civilian in Israel by making military service mandatory, meaning that just about every Israeli civilian is a potential combatant, which means that even if Hamas was some kind of principled resistance, which it's not, but even if it was, they still wouldn't be able to pick any clear targets. Israeli infrastructure intentionally integrates civilian and military targets so that you can't bomb one without bombing the other. Any attack on Israel by anybody is going to kill civilians. When this first happened, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was gonna spark World War III. And here's why. Iran explicitly wants to destroy Israel. And because they share that goal with Hamas and Hezbollah, they fund both those groups somewhat extensively. However, for a long time, the Iranian government has not been able to get within spitting distance of Israel to even attempt its stated goal of destroying it, which is why Russia matters to this equation, because Russia was really active in Syria until they invaded Ukraine. Once they invaded Ukraine, they had to divert their troops away from Syria, which allowed Bashar al-Assad's other main ally, Iran, to step in and start essentially doing for him what Russia had previously done for him. This means that Iran now has a huge amount of influence over both Iraq and Syria. And my thinking was that Hamas was essentially the bait, and Gaza was a trap set by Iran Because why else would Hamas do this? Were they seriously not expecting Netanyahu to retaliate with violence, with war, with a ground invasion? Did they think that wouldn't happen? Or did they want that to happen? Is that what they were intending to provoke? Specifically, to prevent Egypt and Saudi Arabia from getting closer to Israel, so that in the ideal world, the Iranian coalition might in fact be joined by them against Israel, or at the very least, they might refuse to help Israel when Iran was able to invade. Now, with that said, I've kind of abandoned that position because I don't think that it was that well thought through. There may be an alternate universe where it was, but that universe would all but have to be alternate. With that said, however, I don't think Hamas has to be handed that idea by Iran in order to make use of it. There's no reason why... What's this guy's name? Khaled Mashal? I have no idea if he's still in charge over there or not. But whoever occupies this guy's seat today could very well have come up with the idea himself. Because if you kill 700 Israeli civilians and also kidnap some, and even kidnap German and American citizens and bring them back to the Gaza Strip, yeah, that's really bad. And it has certainly resulted in a large amount of pro-Israel sentiment rising in at least America and the UK. Probably across Europe, honestly, which was completely predictable. So what's the game? The game is to wait for Netanyahu to do what Netanyahu is going to do. And that is, as anybody can predict, to pursue a final solution to the Palestinian question. And yes, I am fully aware of what I suggest, and no, I don't think it's a reach at all. He wants to get rid of them. He wants them gone. He may not care if they're dead or not, but he definitely wants them out of Israel. And honestly, if you look at his track record, I think it wouldn't be too big a stretch to say that actually he would prefer dead. He has certainly denied them internet access and electricity, as well as access to food and water. In other words, it is not going to be long at all before natural causes would start killing thousands of Palestinians, even if Israel was not actively shelling them and preparing for a ground invasion. Most, if not all, of Israel's response to the attack so far could be classified as a war crime. And of course, Biden sends huge naval vessels to the Mediterranean and comes out and declares American support of Israel in this conflict. Of course, this start date is January 1st, 2017, meaning that Joe Biden is here played by Barack Obama. By the way, the world's biggest meme also happened. Because as soon as this heated up and Israeli soldiers started mobilizing en masse and preparing for the ground invasion that at this time still hasn't happened yet as I'm recording this, but is probably imminent, Russia decided to make the world's funniest statement by calling on Israel to de-escalate the situation. It is the funniest shit to me that the only country so far to come out with an unambiguously good take on what's going on here is also the one that launched an unprovoked invasion of a neutral country less than 2 years ago. That is so hilarious, and I hope the nuance of it never gets left out of the history books at any time period in the future. Very good meme, sir, but also, Vladimir Putin, I denounce the fact that you are still alive, and I would very much like it if you keeled over dead immediately. Although I might like it better if you got sniped. So anyway, that's basically my thoughts on the current situation with Gaza and Israel and Palestine. Did Hamas do a bad? Yes. Yes, they did. But in this situation, what they amount to is a useful enemy for the Israeli government. And it is so much worse than Netanyahu's incompetence allowing this to happen. His incompetence actually directly caused it to happen. If there is a solution to this, it is de-escalation. International law has not been applied equally to Israel, and it's not going to be. At the end of the day, though, it's all about the civilians, and since the start of this conflict with the Hamas attack, Israel is already responsible for killing more civilians in it than Hamas is. Western countries will never see Palestinian civilians as people as long as Israeli civilians are being hurt. And that is exactly the message that Hamas wants Egypt and Saudi Arabia to take away. Hello, Future Raven here. I just had a realization. Palestine, despite having a coast from Gaza, is denied ocean rights. There is no such thing as Palestinian waters. International waters goes right up to their coastline. And you know what was discovered off that coast recently? Oil. In other words, if Palestine were being treated like a country, instead of the lesser half of an apartheid state, they would have a tremendous natural resource available to them that could potentially lift their entire country out of poverty. Do you think Netanyahu might like an excuse to make sure they never get national waters? Netanyahu has said that Hamas is worse than ISIS, which is really ironic, considering that there was a while where the Islamic State actually bordered Israel. I believe the area they occupied was too small to fit on this map, but they did share a border with Israel. And the Islamic State was basically the only faction that didn't shell Israel, and Israel was basically the only faction that didn't shell the Islamic State. And that's not because there's any love lost between ISIS militants and Israeli settler colonialists in the Golan Heights. It's because they both had nothing but enemies, and were really happy to have somebody out there who wasn't shelling them. So basically, the same guy who's saying that Hamas is worse than ISIS, which I mean, okay, hang on. Same category, yes. Hamas is a terrorist organization that has seized control of a large number of civilians, and ISIS is a terrorist organization that seized control of a huge number of civilians. Honestly though, one of these had the power to take control of immense swaths of land and cripple the armies of the internationally recognized states around it, and the other is currently starving to death, as usual, thanks to Israeli policy. I think they might be slightly different in their capacity to unload death and suffering on their victims. ISIS successfully carried out arguably successfully. They carried out a genocide against the Yazidi people, killed thousands of them, and meanwhile Hamas commits one terror attack, and as a result, the Palestinian people are facing genocide. Comparing the two of them is extremely favorable to ISIS. But not only that, but the guy who's making the comparison didn't shell ISIS when he could have, and funded and supported Hamas. At the end of the day, I fully maintain that de-escalation is the only way to prevent, frankly, the complete eradication of the Palestinian people. But if Hamas were to try to de-escalate, which they never will, they would get removed from power anyway, and Israel would genocide the Palestinians anyway. If Israel de-escalates, on the other hand, then there could potentially be a diplomatic solution in the future somewhere down the line. Israel, for practical purposes, keeps the Palestinians in open-air concentration camps, both on the west bank of the Jordan River and on the Gaza Strip, which borders Egypt. And by the way, Israel has actively prevented Palestinian refugees from fleeing Gaza into Egypt by closing the one corridor they could have taken. And it's not like Egypt wants to be flooded with refugees either. Basically, there is nowhere for the Palestinians to go from Gaza. They cannot get out, and Israel's just going to shell them into oblivion. You might notice that there is a slight imbalance of power between these two. And in order for de-escalation to work, the more powerful party has to make the first move. And so far, Netanyahu has made no indication that he wants to de-escalate. Every move he has made so far has indicated that in fact he wants to escalate the conflict. Flatly, he has had every opportunity to stop this from happening, and he hasn't done it. And he's still not doing it. And he's not going to, because what he wants is a final solution to the Palestinian question. Thank you for watching. Please remember to tell me what a retard I am in the comments. Also like the video if you hate me, and subscribe if you don't want to see more. And I'll probably see you later with more bad takes later on. Also, watch Real Life Lore, that channel is amazing. Educate yourselves. Especially you fuckers who've been coming out in support of the Israeli state. Okay, I think I've said everything now. Should I play Should I play Millennium Dawn? I feel like that would be terrible. I'm bad enough at Total War. I don't need to show you how embarrassingly bad I am at Hearts of Iron 4. Whatever, I'm gonna keep making content. See you later, and for the love of God, please, do not stand with Hamas, but do stand with Palestine. And don't pretend that Hamas and Israel are on equal footing. They're not. Okay, now I'm done. Bye.